Thanks very much for having me. You'll have to pardon me. I like to keep the snipers guessing, so I'm going to be moving a bit. It's a lot easier for me. When I was asked about proposals, I thought what I'd like to do is pick some things that are the low-hanging fruit. There's so many things that can be done. That what are the things that we might do that we could start today that would have an effect tomorrow, and starting with that. So that's the focus for me. I'll begin with the fact that we can leverage something that's already available to us, and that's the values that scientists hold. So Anderson and her colleagues did a survey of more than 3,000 researchers in early and mid-career about whether they endorse the norms of science compared to counter norms. Do you endorse transparency versus secrecy? Do you endorse being skeptical of your own work rather than dogmatism, defending your ideas against others? And just went through a list of these. And what you see up at the top is the gray bar is indicating the percentage of people that endorsed the norms of science over the counter norms. I believe in transparency, it's important. And they said, okay, don't tell me what you endorse or what you believe, tell me what you do in your daily practice. And still, most people say, I try to live by the norms of science, right? Most are the gray bar, more people acknowledging that they practice the counter norms over the norms, the black bar. They say, okay, don't tell me what you do, tell me what the other people in your field do, right? And then it looks like this, right? And this is both optimistic and very pessimistic simultaneously. The values are there. Scientists desire transparency. They embrace the norms of how science is supposed to operate. That's why they got into it. And simultaneously, they're very cynical and skeptical that that's how the world works in science. And so actually behaving according to the values of science is perceived as a way to damage one's own career. Other people are in it for themselves. They're doing the things to get ahead. And so I can't express my values in my behavior because otherwise I'll lose. I won't get a job. I won't be able to keep the job. I won't advance in my career. So we can shift that if we just allow the opportunity to surface those values and in behavior. And so our proposals are very simple ones that just leverage the fact that the values are there. So the first is that the concept is that making the behaviors visible, desired behaviors that are valued, will promote their adoption. Right now, practicing open data or open materials is not visible. One doesn't get credit for it. You don't have incentives to do it, and so there isn't a perceived value in doing it, even if someone has the ideals, because there's also extra work in order to get it done. So a very simple solution is badges. Badges that specify what it means to have open data or open materials, and if a journal adopts badges, then when an author meets the criteria for what open data means, that it's in an independent repository, that it's accessible to others, that it has a code book that one can interpret, then their article gets the badge. Now, badges are stupid, right? They're stupid. We don't need no stinking badges. This isn't Girl Scouts. This is science, right? But they work because they are signals of an important behavior. So here is data we just finished analyzing. We have the journal Psychological Science implemented badges January 1st, 2014. And so we looked at Psychological Science in 4 comparison journals that did not adopt badges in psychology. And we compare what's the rate of sharing of data in repositories. And what we find is this. So the sharing rates for Psychological Science prior to adopting badges is 3% of the articles. In the first half of 2015, 38% of those articles have open data for a stupid little badge, right? All it is doing is signaling that we followed this practice. We made our data available so that others can look at it. Right? And just offering that signal is a way for people to say, well, I have these values, and now I can actually show that I care about this. And simultaneously, the journal is showing, oh, this is something that we care about too, and we value when our authors do it. So it's almost free. It'd be crazy to not have badges get more generalized. It's so easy to implement. So that's one proposal. Let's do more badges. Second proposal is that we can enable people to express their values and their behavior by providing standards that will shape those cultural norms. So the values are there in the abstract, and the daily practice doesn't provide means with which people can embody those values in their behavior. So one effort that we have for trying to promote those practices is the top guidelines. The top guidelines are 8 different standards. Data citation, for example, getting credit for actually making the data available, so it is seen as itself a scholarly contribution, diversifying what it means to contribute scholarly work. Other criteria for transparency, 2 forms of pre-registration, pre-registering the study so that you know that it exists, pre-registering the analysis plan to distinguish confirmatory versus exploratory research, and then valuing of replication. So journals, the design of the top guidelines in order to really lower the barrier to entry so it's easy for journals and funders to adopt them is that they exist in levels. So I'll show you the levels as an example for data sharing next. And they're modular. So a journal can, or a funder can look at those 8 different standards and say, well, 5 of these are really relevant to us. Our community is ready for us to do something, so we will adopt those. And for now, we're going to ignore the others. And they're designed with the intent to be as agnostic to discipline as possible. The abstract goals of what it means to do scholarly work and how it is that should be shared and otherwise to promote widespread adoption. So to give you an illustration of the low barrier to entry, each of the 8 standards has 3 levels. The first level for data sharing is a very simple standard. Article states whether the data are available and if so, where to access them. That's it. Just a requirement to be explicit. And with a badge, you get a lot more adoption rates. The second is an actual requirement. There is some burden to the author. They must share their data. They must put it in a trusted repository. And if there are exceptions, like for privacy or confidentiality or proprietary reasons, those have to be identified upon submission, not after the fact, so that the editor can make an assessment. Is that okay under these circumstances? Then the third is the most stringent of the standards, but it also has additional costs. There's work that needs to be done that journals may or may not be prepared to do. So for data sharing, data must be posted to a trusted repository and reported analyses will be reproduced independently prior to publication. Now most editors look at that and say there is no way we are ever going to do that in our journal. That sounds like a lot of work, and it is more work. But there are some journals that are doing this as a practice and are refining it to become a more efficient thing of what do they require authors to submit upon submission of manuscript or publication in order to streamline that process. So what we have with top guidelines so far, there's the website, cos.io/top. The development of this is a collaboration with Science Magazine, the Center for Open Science, and BITS. And already there are 535 journal signatories and 56 organizations. The most recent 2 are Wiley and Royal Society have just signed on to top. And we also made the barrier to entry to be a signatory as low as possible, which is just we will do a review of the top guidelines to decide whether and which to adopt. So the proposal here is let's get everybody thinking about this in terms of standards and then evolve these along the way. Okay. Third proposal. This is a more abstract one, which is science and technology silos. Cave's talk was fantastic for setting this up, are interfering with open science. And so the action that we can take is to connect the technologies in order to remove those silos and make it a lot easier to discover and work with the data and other research products that occur. So we are working on this through what is called the Open Science Framework. It's a free open source framework that is a scholarly commons, connecting and preserving the entire research lifecycle. And when we talk about the entire research lifecycle, we mean it in the abstract way that applies to scholarship in general. We're not disciplinary specific in any way. So the different parts of how it is that the research process works. And what we have been doing is through API relationships, the modern web, application programming interfaces, where we have a common abstracted API that knows how to talk and can talk to any other service. And so we are connecting the different tools across this particular, across the research lifecycle. And we've just given grants out to 19 different groups to connect additional services to this so that it is much easier for the researcher to do his or her own work because they can make easier transitions between the services that they use. It's also much easier to reproduce their workflow because the services are connected together, and so you can track the transitions. And it's a lot easier to aggregate the data and metadata of what is actually happening. So this, coupled with a number of different technical projects, are the means with which we are trying to make that entire research lifecycle more discoverable. And so there's a number of partners that we have that are illustrating different elements of this. And just to highlight a couple of them, with American Geophysical Union, we are the technical partner building out a set of tools for discovering repositories. So a journal can say, go to this tool, discover the right repository for their kind of data, and then emerge that. Right? With Association of Research Libraries, we're working on SHARE, which is creating a single pipeline, fire hose really, of all research events that occur anywhere. So one of the big problems that Kay identified is that you have to go to 12 different places to discover the relevant information about clinical trials. What SHARE is doing is creating a single pipeline and aggregating that metadata so there's one place to go for search and discovery. And then we have layers that are providing ways to aggregate that, curate that data to put the things together. So a project with Open Knowledge Foundation is called Open Trials, and it's an illustration of the curation that can come from once you have a single pipeline with all of this information coming together. So just the very last point is that if you have technology projects, talk to us about helping you with that technology. We are a technology company. We've got lots of computers. They're all over the office. We have walls that you can write on with pens. It really looks like a technology company. There's free food in the kitchen, and so there's young people there all the time just eating. They walk while they do their work. So it really is a technology place that they do yoga, for God's sakes. We really are a service organization that's just trying to provide the technology tools to enable the things that many of us in the scientific community are trying to build in our own ways, but we're trying to help make that provide general solutions and connect these workflows together. So call on us for anything that we can help with in this. So I'll stop there. Thanks very much.